Hi there! I'm just finishing up my corset project, and I thought I would show you how I'm attaching the binding this time. Here's one completed side, and the binding this time I attached it from the front, folded it over, and did a stitch in a ditch right here so it looks beautiful from the outside and nicely done on the inside, but the stitching you can't really see it from the side. And so I just have one more to do here, so there's binding there, and I just about started it and then I realized I should make a video. So what I do first is actually try to trim up both sides of the corsets so they will be matching. Right now this is the lining, but I will like take them before I put the binding on, put them together, match them all up, and trim down to, just in case they don't match. And then I'll put the binding on one corset, and then I'll make sure it matches up as well when I put the binding on the next side, which takes a lot of little explaining to do, but you can figure it out, I think. Anyway, to do my sewing line for the binding, I just used the guide on my machine to do like a 1/2 inch around, which was the seam allowance to begin with. So I just make a 1/2 inch line around to be my guide for the binding. Then I will take the binding strip here. I already started to do this. I attach it to the back, just this little strip. So when I attach it to the front and sew it here, when you flip it up, it'll be nice and contained in the edge there. That's a little trick I learned somewhere. But I'm gonna go ahead and stitch this on, and I'll show you what the next step is. Alright, so I got this stitched down, and by the way, I don't pin this down ahead of time. I find it a little faster and easier to see what I'm doing by just placing the binding the groove, whatever, this part where it folds over. I put like the fold line over the stitch line and just keep peeking as I go to see if I'm following the stitch line, which usually works pretty well. But then I go back and I check to see if I missed anything, because I'll be able to see the stitch line on this side, and there's a little spot right here that I missed. So I'm gonna go back and just restitch a little bit into the stitch line here, and then I'll cover it up. And once I'm done with that, I will trim off this piece and do the same technique as I did before. Flip it over and sew just a little bit right there. So I'll show you what I'm doing next. Alright, so I just fixed that little spot, and I did my little flippy thing here. Next step is to flip up the binding here to expose the raw edges of the corset, and I'm actually going to trim it up about half its length right now. So it's a 1/2 inch, so it'll be a 1/4 of an inch. And because this material frays very easily, I will use pinking shears, or I will use, I actually have a rotary blade that are pinking, which goes a lot faster. So I'll trim that up and I'll show you the next step. I started the next step here, which is to take the binding from the lining side, if I can get a hold of it here, and you fold it over, and you will try to fold it over so it will be past the stitching line here, and you will pin it in place. And once you're all done pinning, you turn it over and you start sewing as close to the binding as you can, but try not to sew on the binding, and that is basically stitching in the ditch. And if you folded the binding over neatly on this side past the stitch line, the stitches will catch this side of the binding and it'll stay in place. So I'm going to go ahead and finish pinning this. I'm going to sew it up and I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. And here is the finished product. all nicely stitched. So my corset is complete. I'm going to go ahead and put the laces on and try it on for the first time. Thanks for watching.